Hey guys, tonight we wander into a primordial hush where leafy giants press in around you. You feel the moist breath of moss curling along ancient trunks, and insects orchestrate a chorus somewhere just out of sight. Mist threads through the air like drifting spirits, and something about this moment feels dangerous. You probably won't survive this, JK, but it might test your bug tolerance. Imagine that each dewdrop could hold a memory from a civilization erased by time, because, spoiler, this clearing once echoed with footsteps of people whose names we've lost. And fair warning, if you thought your last camping trip was intense, I hope you packed snacks because the journey ahead doesn't include any snack breaks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're rocking it at home in your pajamas or sneaking headphones at work, I'd love to know. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off a narrow trail into a sudden clearing, and the world hushes. Towering strangler figs arch overhead, their roots twisting like ancient serpents. Damp earth smells of fermentation and decay. The air clings to your skin like a damp blanket, and each breath feels like sipping warm soup you didn't ask for. You notice a scattering of limestone fragments underfoot, ghostly white against the reddish-brown soil. There's a stillness here that feels almost prehistoric. Hardcore scholars remind us that the Maya civilization thrived between AD 250 and 900 CE, building ceremonial causeways called sakbib to stitch their cities together. Here, those limestone chunks might be the remains of an uncelebrated sack, though historians still argue whether this particular path marked sacred territory or a simple mule track. Fringe researchers claim that some of these clearings were once landing pads for alien visitors. So, if you spot crop circle patterns in the undergrowth, don't freak out. Personally, I blame overly enthusiastic leaf cutters. Your eyes dart too. Massive buttress roots rippling across the ground, each root like a coiling python half hidden by ferns. If you've ever swatted at mosquitoes mid-safari, you know that the local bug buffet doesn't require a reservation. Wiping sweat from your brow, you notice a faint stone lintel peeking out from under moss. It twinkles in the dappled sunlight. You can practically hear the ghost of an ancient mason muttering, "I told them to install a canopy fan." Stepping closer, you brace yourself for possible pitfalls. Snake pits are a thing, right? Instead, you find a narrow, root-choked tunnel entrance, shrouded in vines. A breeze sighs out of it, cool as a sea, luring you forward. Some adventurers swear this tunnel spirals down into an underworld chamber. It's illuminated by phosphorescent fungi that glow like neon signs. Historians still argue whether these subterranean passages were escape routes for priests or drainage channels for seasonal floods. Leaning on the tunnel's mouth, you catch the scent of jasmine slipping through cracks in stone. So sweet. It almost feels like treachery, like sugar in your gas tank. Vines drip with moisture, and each droplet sounds like a tiny bell in the hush. A sudden bird call, sharp, demanding, snaps you back. Sound travels weirdly here, bending around trees and stones until directions blur. You realize you didn't pack a compass, so orientation is purely guesswork. Behind you, the jungle ferns hush the sounds of your boots squelching in mud. You squat to examine hoof-shaped depressions in the soil tapers. Dogs. Or maybe ancient guardians turned to hoofed animals once night fell. Someone once suggested a spirit world where animals morphed at dusk, but that might be too much midnight radio. Honestly, I'd settle for a friendly taper guide. Looking up. Sunlight filters through the canopy in golden slats, each beam spotlighting swirling motes of dust. You lift your camera, only to remember you told yourself, no photos gotta keep. it authentic. A cicada's drone rises and falls like an off-pitch choir. If you've ever wondered how the planet would sound singing off-key, here's your answer. Somewhere deep, you swear you hear chanting in a low register, distant as a dream. Your hand brushes against a carved relief barely discernible, but definitely human-made. It's a stylized jaguar face, teeth bared in eternal half-smile. Jaguars were royal symbols. They were the rock stars of the animal kingdom. Wild guess. The clearing was an initiation ground. Or maybe just a very exclusive jungle nightclub. Historians still argue whether the jaguar motif signified power over the underworld or just a love of good branding. As you inch around the clearing's edge, you spot earthen platforms, long collapsed, like blinking cursor lines on a frozen screen. These might have been low benches for onlookers or altars for nighttime ceremonies. Fringe lore claims underground energy vortices converge here, which supposedly give you better skins, so feel free to guzzle the groundwater. But if you wake up with phosphorescent cheeks, don't say I didn't warn you. Heat pockets swirl underfoot, radiating from sun-baked rocks. When Maya astronomers wanted to track the sun, they'd use rock hearths to measure shadow lengths. Here, shadows wrap around roots in shifting folds. Next time, pack sunscreen thicker than your common sense though. Some ancient manuscripts mention crocodile dung as solar protector. Probably skip that hack unless you're into extreme OSTR Zen. As a breeze teases the leaves overhead, you step back and take it all in. A cradle of stones and vines humming with secrets. Some say the whole clearing aligns with sunrise on the equinox, marking planting cycles for corn. Farmers long ago tracked those solar shifts to decide when to sow their seeds. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the distant chant of harvest prayers drifting among the trees like a lullaby. Later, when you meet those moss-clad monoliths, you'll remember how first you learned to read the jungle's silent language here. You step away from the clearing's jaguar ride statue and follow a narrow earth trail deeper into the understory. Ferns bend back as if giving you passage, and spiderwebs shimmer with dew like fragile chandeliers. A hush settles over your shoulders, kind you feel when you've slipped past a museum rope and into forbidden archives. Every breath tastes of wet stone and moss, and that chorus of insects fades until only your heartbeat keeps time. A single strand of vine brushes your cheek, reminding you of cicada's distant hum in the first clearing. Ahead, you discover a grove of monoliths towering slabs of porous limestone, mottled with emerald moss and lichen. Streaks of ochre stain their bases where mineral-rich water trickles down. The trunks of ancient ceiba trees wrap their roots around one monolith, as though offering it both protection and a slow embrace. Sunlight slips through the canopy in fractured beams, illuminating glyphs that lurk just beneath layers of growth. You feel a low vibration in the air, as if the stones themselves are murmuring the secrets of their makers. These towering stones bring to mind the colossal Comac heads, hewn from basalt between 1200 and 400 BCE, masterpieces of pre-Columbian artistry, suggesting remarkable skill in quarrying and transport. Unlike those hemispherical sculptures, these monoliths stand tall and narrow. Their carvings more abstract, far cry from the Olmec's bulbous visages, yet just as imposing. Fringe theorists insist these standing stones encode cosmic frequencies, claiming if you press your ear to the stone, you can hear star names spoken in an ancient tongue. Historians still argue whether these monoliths marked territorial boundaries or served as calendar markers aligning with solstices. Either way, you can't resist pressing a hand to one, half expecting a whisper against your palm. The carvings themselves are weathered but unmistakably human-made. Stepped spirals, stylized birds with long beaks, and abstract hourglass shapes. If you trace the grooves, Your fingertips pick up tiny flints embedded in the grooves, perhaps remnants of pigment or offerings laid in centuries past. Rain seeping through cracks once brushed pigments over these lines, turning their surfaces into living canvases. Some archaeologists believe the pigments were made from cochineal insects, producing vivid reds that stood out against pale rock. You imagine priests kneeling here, their voices rising in chant. Each glyph representing a verse you'll never fully understand as you circle the stones. Your flashlight beam catches a narrow slot carved into one pillar's face. It's too uniform to be purely decorative, maybe a slot for a wooden beam or a ceremonial banner. Fringe historians propose these were portals to the underworld, where shamans entered to commune with spirits. A few New Age guides now conduct stone communion retreats here, inviting tourists to sit in silent meditation for chakra realignment. You can almost hear the soft breathing of those overnight visitors, their phones buzzing with Instagram notifications at dawn, moving from pillar to pillar. You notice small recesses at eye height, each too small to hold human remains, but perfect for tiny offerings, shell beads, animal teeth, or bits of jade. Nearby, a weathered staircase curves into shadow, hinting at a subterranean chamber. Legends whisper of catacombs filled with phosphorescent mushrooms, the dim glow leading to sacred altars. Historians still argue whether these tunnels were built for ritual use or for diverting seasonal floodwaters away from the plaza. A light breeze teases down the grove, carrying the distant echo of your own footsteps as though the stones are mocking your presence. You pause to listen. A faint drip, drip, drip echoes somewhere behind a curtain of vines, reminding you of the reflective pools in the last section. It's easy to forget you're thousands of years removed from the trench beneath those temple ruins. You peer upward, where roots pierce mossy rock and birds wheel overhead. Their calls blend with distant thunder, actual weather, or an earthquake warning. Probably just an approaching storm. You run a gloved hand across the surface of the largest monolith. Its carvings show intertwined serpents, fangs bared in eternal confrontation. You recall the serpent statues under the moonlight, waiting further in leads for later exploration. The motif feels deliberate. A callback to jaguar worship and serpent symbolism interwoven across sites throughout Mesoamerica. These stones speak a common language of power and protection, yet each has its regional dialect. Historians still argue whether the serpent motif originated here or was imported from neighboring lowland kingdoms. Leaning closer, you spot thin cracks filled with bright green moss, like wounds healed by nature. A single strand of vine dangles, releasing a shower of fine debris onto the stone surface, nature's way of reclaiming artistry. You blow gently on the carving to clear the moss, revealing a faded line of dots and lines, possibly a numeric system counting lunar cycles. Maya astronomers famously tracked moon phases to schedule rituals and harvests. Imagine religious leaders here once studied these calendars beneath the monolith's shadows, reciting dates to shape agricultural life. Above, sunbeams dance across the uneven ground. Now the heat pockets underfoot remind you of the sun-baked rocks in the first clearing. You wonder if crocodile dung sunscreen would have saved those ancient stoneworkers from sunburn. Probably not a hit at archaeological conferences. You shift your pack and scratch at an itch on your ankle, acutely aware of mosquito buzzers settling for a feast. The guiding principle of jungle exploration: always check your ankles. Rounding the final pillar, you emerge onto a small terrace overlooking the grove. From here, you see the stones in full perspective, guardians frozen mid-prow, as if still awaiting the return of their masters. A faint rain begins, soft and rhythmic. Water beads on the tops of monoliths, then cascades down their mossy flanks in miniature waterfalls. The grove transforms into a living cathedral. Every drop a chime in an ancient orchestra. You stand there for a moment, eyes closed, listening to the rain drum a lullaby on stone. The distant chant you imagined earlier surfaces again, but this time it's real raindrops falling in syncopation. You breathe in the heady scent of wet limestone and jungle earth, feeling the stone's silent stories seep into you. When the storm finally ebbs, you'll gather your gear and follow the trail toward winding waterways, but for now you linger, savoring the monolith's solemn watch over a world that once was. You rise from the rain-kissed monolith grove and follow a narrow stone causeway that leads you to a quiet inlet. The air shimmers, with droplets dancing atop emerald water. You pause at the water's edge, toes curling around slick pebbles, and feel a soft current tugging at your ankles. Somewhere overhead, a heron calls a deliberate thing, like a conductor's baton slicing the humid air. You board a dugout canoe carved from a single tree trunk, its interior dark and fragrant with aged sap and algae bloom, balanced carefully. You push off into a labyrinth of winding waterways that stitch this ancient city together, paddling forward. You brush fingertips against low-hanging vines dripping with orchid blossoms. Each petal shivers on the water surface before drifting away, a miniature voyage in itself. The canoe glides like a silent shark, bow-carving ripples that lace the canal's veneer. You feel weightless, buoyed by the murmured conversation of water against wood. In this liquid corridor, the jungle's roar hushes to a heartbeat pulse. Mosquitoes hold off their attack either. They respect the peace, or they're admiring your ankles. These canals once ferried canoes, brimming with jade beads, cacao, beans, and obsidian blades between palaces and plazas. Archaeologists have uncovered complex hydraulic networks at sites like El Mirador, dating back to as early as 350 BCE, showing that pre-Columbian engineers mastered water management long before European aqueducts appeared on the scene. Historians still argue whether these channels primarily served irrigation needs or were transportation arteries for elite rituals. But evidence suggests both functions intertwined seamlessly in daily life. You drift beneath a canopy that arches into a living tunnel of roots and lianas. Sunlight filters through leaves in a kaleidoscope of green, each beam spotlighting swirling motes of pollen. A solitary fish darts beneath you, its scales flashing silver. If only you'd packed goggles, though you probably don't want to know what lurks in this murky world. Fringe lore insists some canals hide submerged temples guarded by eel-like creatures that glow at night, guiding lost spirits. Local storytellers still whisper about glowing eyes beneath the water, though you suspect someone saw a catfish and ran with it. The water smells of damp earth and decaying leaves, a fragrance oddly comforting in its authenticity. You inhale deeply and taste a hint of wild cinnamon carried by a breeze. Every splash of your paddle echoes off hidden rock walls, then fades into distant bird calls. If you wiggle your toes, you catch the subtle brush of submerged roots, nature's foot massage, jungle style. You imagine ancient canoemen in feathered headdresses gliding through the same channels, trading messages in knots of knotted cords called quipus. While quipu use is best known in the Andes, recent discoveries hint Mesoamerican traders might have employed similar mnemonic devices. Historians still argue whether those knots marked commercial exchange or star alignments. Ahead, bent stone piers emerge from the water like toothy jaws. These were docking points for small vessels, carved with stepped edges for easy boarding. You hop onto one with a graceful leap hat. Least you tell yourself it was graceful and run a hand along its slick surface. Faded paint clings in crevices, reds, blues, and yellows that once gleamed under tropical sun. Modern conservators debate if the pigments originated from mineral ochres or ground gemstones. Fringe artisans claim traces of pulverized green obsidian lurk in the pigments, giving them cosmic sparkle at dusk, settling back into the canoe. You drift past a low archway formed by interlocking banyan roots. The arch feels like a threshold into spoken silence. Here, the water narrows, and overhead vines block out most sunlight. Bioluminescent fungi cling to roots, pulsing soft violet glows in the dusky water. You lower your hand into the current. Tiny phosphorescent larvae wriggle across your skin like starlight. Some explorers report that these luminous tunnels were once sacred, with shamans leading midnight canoe vigils by torchlight. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies invoked rain or lunar deities. A sudden croak deep and resonant breaks. The hush. A bullfrog perches on a submerged log, throat inflating in hypnotic rhythm. You lean forward, fascinated, and nearly drop your paddle. Frogs were symbols of fertility in many pre-Columbian cultures, their calls marking the arrival of rainy seasons vital for maize crops. You grin, imagining you're part of an ancient frog-conducted ritual. Ribbit, ribbit, let the fields prosper. Out of the shaded tunnel, the canal broadens into a circular basin rimmed by low platforms. Here, fishermen once waded knee-deep, calling nets across the water to catch fish for palace feasts. You peer into the depths. Dozens of tiny fish shimmer beneath lily pads. You'd love to scoop one up for a closer look, but your hands are too shaky. The platforms bear incised glyphs depicting fish and water deities' icons tied to chalk, the Maya rain god. Some offer garlands of shells here even today, seeking blessings for bountiful harvests. You nudge the canoe toward one platform and step out, boots squelching in ankle-deep water. It feels oddly like stepping into a fantasy where fish nibble at your soles, a spa treatment your ancestors never dreamt of. You find a shallow cavity carved into the stone basin for ritual water offerings, still containing murky rainwater. It smells of earth and time. You cup some water and let it trickle over your face, part meditation, part misguided skincare routine. Fringe beauty gurus on the internet rave about ancient jungle water facials, though dermatologists disagree on whether that's a thing or just marketing. Clambering back into the canoe, you settle in for the next stretch, paddling toward a narrow channel flanked by high banks of mud and reeds. The light grows softer, tinted rose by the setting sun even, though you can't see the sun itself. This is the tip of a canal system stretching miles, carved through bedrock with such precision that some claim alien engineers must have lent a hand. Historians still argue whether human ingenuity alone crafted these feats or if lost. Technological miracles predated known history. As you glide ahead, the canal's walls vibrate with echoing bird calls, toucans, parrots, and distant screams you can't quite place. The water's surface mirrors the sky's shifting palette. Coral pinks and lavender purples bleed into darker blues as twilight approaches. You lean back, paddle resting across your lap, and let the canoe drift where it will. The gentle rocking lulls you into a half-dream. The rhythmic lapping of water like an ASMR track picked precisely for maximum relaxation. Somewhere in the bend ahead, you know a stone dock awaits, the one flanked by carved feline heads, muzzles shattered by centuries of storms. That's where you'll disembark next, stepping back onto ground where footprints once polished worn stones. But for now, you surrender to the water's guidance, a silent passenger in a vessel centuries old. You might not have survived the mosquitoes or the kaleidoscope of humidity, but here, on these whispering waterways, you feel strangely invincible. Or at least, well hydrated. You tread onto the cracked stone dock flanked by feline heads, their jaws worn smooth by centuries of lapping water. Your boots thud softly on wet rock as you step onto a narrow causeway, half submerged by a shallow lagoon. The water ripples with your weight, sending concentric rings across emerald green reflections. Mist hovers low, curling around half-sunken pillars like spectral veils. A dragonfly drones past, wobbling in the humid heat. And somewhere beneath your feet, small fish dart away in rippling schools. Your ankles feel tickled. Like the world's worst pedicure. The temple ahead emerges ghost-like limestone columns. Rise from the water surface, their tops lost in the swirling haze. Moss drapes every surface, hugging worn carvings until glyphs dissolve into living green. You reach out to trace a barely legible relief, an intertwined pair of deer, antlers touching midair in an eternal dance. Oh, deer were sacred in Mesoamerican lore, symbols of the forest's lifeblood. And archaeologists confirm that such animal motifs crowned many Mayan temple entrances around AD 600 to 900 CE. Historians still argue whether these carvings marked seasonal hunting rites or signified clan totems carved by itinerant sculptors. The water laps at your calves, cool against the swelter. You squint into the mist and pick out a submerged staircase leading down into deeper, darker currents. Ancient engineers at sites like Copan carved sunken plazas with water channels for drainage and ritual cleansing, demonstrating hydraulic ingenuity centuries before modern pumps. Fringe explorers swear that during solstice mornings, those submerged steps reveal hidden glyphs glowing faintly with phosphorescent algae. So, if you see neon runes and start packing for Mars, don't panic. It's probably just bioluminescent bacteria on their best day. A damp breeze drifts off the temple's face, carrying a scent of wet limestone, decaying leaves, something sugar-sweet petals from night-blooming orchids carried on water currents. Your shirt clings to your back. Sweat beads at your hairline. The mist thickens, making the pillars' carved capitals look like floating crowns. One column bears a near-faded depiction of the maize god, corn tassels framing his elongated head, proof that this complex once celebrated agricultural cycles as fiercely as the harvest itself. Foot by foot, you wade deeper, each step revealing new details. Tiny spiral glyphs peek out between cracks, perhaps recording lunar counts. Mayan astronomers meticulously tracked moon phases to align temple ceremonies with cosmic rhythms. Historians still argue whether these lunar glyphs were day markers for public festivals or secret codes for priesthood initiations. A T beneath the water. You glimpse a circular depression, maybe an altar basin where priests poured blood or offered cacao froths. Fringy authors claim this basin once held sacrificial quetzal feathers that turned the water iridescent, glowing against night shadows. If you find rainbow-tinted water, maybe skip the Google search for Kitsilink cocktails. The lagoon's surface fractures as a group of catfish skitters away. Their whiskers brush your shins, sending unsolicited tickles up your spine. You bite back a laugh. An ancient ritual probably didn't include giggling foreign interlopers. Combining sacred pool ceremonies with existential humor wasn't exactly part of the curriculum. You clear your throat so the next archaeologist who reads your notes won't think you channeled the giggling goddess. Suddenly, the mists part, and you catch sight of a stone mask, the visage of a long-jawed serpent, mouth agape, fangs dripping moss. You imagine this to be an entrance to an inner sanctum, an underwater vestibule where only shamans dared tread. Local guides tell tales of divers slipping through that maw, discovering hidden chambers filled with carved skull altars. Historians still argue whether those passages were escape routes for royalty or secret pilgrimage routes for pilgrims seeking visions. If you fit through that gaping mouth, you might emerge covered in spider webs and questionable fashion choices. Your boots shudder against a submerged ridge, forcing you to shift weight. The water deepens abruptly, swirling around your hips. You hesitate, looking back at dry land shimmering through the mist. No glory in a wet, but if you misjudge depth. Deciding you're braver than your glutes are prepared for, you advance, stepping into near-chest high water. The stone floor dips and rises beneath you, ankle-biting cracks filled with slick algae. You brace yourself, pulse quickening, half expecting ancestral spirits to bubble up with an ominous chant. Instead, you get the soft plop of water dripping from an overhead beam, immersed up to your armpits. You press forward toward a lotus-carved pillar, its base entwined with roots that spiral into the water. Steam rises from where the shallows meet a deeper trench thermal currents, or simply a clever trick of sun-warmed rock below. Fringe enthusiasts claim holy thermal vents bubble here, releasing fumes that induce shamanic trance. If you smell what might be volcanic gases, maybe ease up on that oxygen intake. Your fingertips graze a glyph-carved marker, a stylized sunburst surrounded by droplets. You imagine this is the heart of the temple mural, mapping the sun's descent into the underworld. Mainstream scholars note that Maya temple pools often mirrored the cosmos, symbolizing caves and watery realms beneath Earth's surface, portals to the divine. Historians still argue whether worshippers entered these sacred pools fully clothed or in ceremonial nuditasteful archaeology. Debates can be surprisingly titillating. You duck below the mist-shrouded surface for a moment, tasting the mineral temps of the water, and resurface with a gasp. It's warmer than expected, like a lukewarm bath you didn't request. A single beam of sunlight breaks through the mist, spotlighting a cycle of carved bas-reliefs. A jaguar stepping across water. Jaguars were believed to prowl between worlds, and this image likely paired with water's mirror to represent that nocturnal crossing. Fringe theorists argue that if you chant jaguar growls thrice here at dawn, you unlock a secret chamber of emerald crystals. If you actually try that, please let me know if it doesn't explode in your face, shaking droplets from your hair. You inch closer to a fallen lintel, half buried beneath reeds. A carved face peers from one end, a deity wearing a headdress of reeds and fish scales. You crouch, pressing lips near the waterline, and exhale softly. Bubbles rise like tiny messages to the surface. Local legends insist that those bubbles are prayers sent on to watery gods. So if your exhale-shaped prayer asks for pizza delivery, you might be disappointed. Beyond the temple's central pool, the ruins stretch back into denser mist. Pillars stand crooked like drunk sentinels, guarding empty chambers. You spot a small side pool, emerald green and eerily still, its surface mirroring the pale canopy overhead. You sit on a submerged bench smooth as polished marble and let the water cradle you. The silence here is so profound your ears ring, and for a moment you feel weightless, suspended in a dream of lost time. A soft croak echoes from a nearby recess. Dark shapes flicker beneath the water, tadpoles or eels, impossible to tell. It's you. Close your eyes, letting each droplet that falls from overhanging vines land on your face like a lullaby. In this silent theater of water and stone, you sense the pulse of rituals long faded. When you finally stand, water dripping down your clothes, you cast one last look at the submerged pillars. Green mists swirl like drifting dancers, and the reflection on the pool's surface quivers like a living painting. You shake the chill from your core and step back onto drier rock, leaving the sunken temple to its aquatic solitude. Ahead lies the ascent of that colossal pyramid. Dry land and steep steps beckon, a contrast you'll welcome after this soaking. You step off the waterlogged stones and plant both feet on dry earth at the base of a vast limestone pyramid. The steps rise sharply before you, each tread worn smooth by centuries of pilgrimage. You run a hand along the scarred edge of the first step. Granular grit presses into your palm like 1,000 tiny needles. A sharp reminder that this climb won't be a casual stroll. The jungle chorus fades behind you as you begin your ascent, sweat beading on your brow and rolling down your jaw. A bead of water, or maybe it's sweat, drops into your eye, and your vision blurs for a moment. You blink it away and glance. Upward, the summit still seems impossibly high. A silent challenge hewn from rock. Archaeologists date this pyramid's construction to around AD 700 during the late Classic period, when elite Maya rulers commissioned towering temples to assert power and commune with the gods. Historians still argue whether this particular pyramid served primarily as a funerary shrine for a king or as an astronomical marker aligned to equinox sunrises. Either way, those builders must have had quads of steel, or at least a fleet of indigent laborers. Fringe enthusiasts suggest the perfectly angled corners and massive blocks couldn't have been lifted by rope and wood alone. It's proposing lost anti-gravity technology instead. If you spot any floating stones on the way up, don't assume hallucinations, just standard fringe theory. Your boots find purchase on each narrow step, and you can feel the limestone warming beneath your soles, stored heat radiating upward like a stone griddle. Insects skitter across the sunlit risers, a colony of leafcutter ants, carrying bits of foliage on their backs, oblivious to your presence. A lizard darts across the next step, tail flicking in warning before it disappears into a crack. You pause to catch your breath and lean forward, hands on knees. From here, even half the climb offers a breathtaking panorama. Treetops stretch to the horizon in an endless sea of emerald, broken only by the occasional clifftop ruin peeking above the canopy. You wipe your forehead and recall that tickles. Temple for soars to 70 meters, once the tallest man-made structure in the Americas. While this pyramid is more modest in height, its scale still dwarfs you. Your fingers graze a carved niche halfway up a recessed panel once housing a stucco-coated statue. Faint traces of red pigment cling to the edges, evidence of vibrant color that greeted ancient pilgrims. Modern conservators debate whether those pigments came from mineral ochres or from cochineal insect dyes, imported from highland trade routes. Fringe apologists claim you can still smell the original red if you press your nose too close, so if you detect notes of cherry and earth, don't blame me. You pivot to face east and notice the sun has climbed to its zenith, the heat intense, enough to blur distant ruins into watercolor smudges. Sweat drips down your spine and pools in the small of your back. You catch yourself imagining a portable AC unit strapped to your pack, totally impractical, but you'd pay good money for it now. A volley of cicadas erupts nearby, a living white noise machine so loud you half expect the stone to vibrate in sympathy. If you've ever doubted that insects could generate white noise louder than your upstairs neighbor's subwoofer, prepare to be proven wrong. Mid-dash climb. A narrow ledge offers a momentary respite. You step off the harsh incline and lean against the weathered stone wall. Lichen mosaics cover the surface, pale green and white flecks that shift in the sunlight. You inspect a carved mask of the Maya rain god, chalked his hooked nose and fangs still discernible under layers of growth. Priests likely climb these steps, clutching lightning-shaped scepters, their robes billowing behind them like rippling banners. Historians still argue whether such processions took place at dawn or dusk, though evidence of bloodletting rituals in nearby stele suggests midnight. Ceremonies were also possible. You close your eyes and inhale the heady scent of hot stone mingled with resinous sap carried on the breeze. The sound of your own breathing merges with the distant chant of wild parrots wheeling overhead. You crack open an energy bar with sticky fingers. Sits your third one today, and they're oily enough to leave you wondering if you're snacking or lubricating your gears. A light joke for the archaeologists back home. This pyramid doesn't come with vending machines. If only you could hit refresh on your inventory like a video game, you'd be golden. gripping a carved handholden, eroded glyph that might depict a stylized head. You haul yourself onto the next level. The air feels thinner here, as though you're moving toward the stratosphere. You glance down. The base of the pyramid shrinks beneath you, the stone steps forming a mouth you just emerged from. A sudden breeze gusts through the plaza, stirring the hem of your shirt and tangling your hair. A chill surprises you in the midday heat, maybe a subtle lecture in thermodynamics, courtesy of the gods. You reach a landing where a small platform juts out from the pyramid face. Here, stone benches once lined the edge for temple attendants. Now, the only company is a lizard, basking in a patch of sun. You sit for a moment, legs dangling over the precipice, toes tapping in the empty air. Below, the jungle canopy pulses. With life, treetop huts and causeways you've traversed shimmer in heat haze. The horizon flares like a mirage. Distant palm trees and temple peaks blending into a mottled skyline as you rise to continue. You tug at a piece of loose moss clinging to your pant leg. It flutters to the step below, and for a moment you expect it to transform into a tiny spirit-guided motif seen in some pyramid carvings. Fringe storytellers swear those dots of moss represent guardian sprites. But mainstream scholars treat that as metaphorical flourish. Historians still argue whether moss-covered offerings were deliberate or simply nature. Reclaiming stone. The final stretch looms above steeper steps, rising to a narrow stairway that bisects the upper tiers. These steps are uneven, height varying, from one riser to the next, as though carved without a measuring stick. You grip the edges with sweaty palms, careful not to slide backward. An imaginary sign flashes in your mind. Caution, no stair lift available. You chuckle through the exertion and press on. Midway, a small cave-like niche appears, a carved alcove, perhaps intended for flame-lit torches to illuminate night. Writes. Now, it's a hollow mouth full of shadows and humidity. Summoning your last reserves of stamina, you pull yourself onto the broad summit platform. Relief and dizziness wash over you as you lean against the final block. Your heart hammers. In your ears, a deafening hush greets you. No insects, no wind, just the quiet exhale of the sky. You step forward to the edge and peer over, an uninterrupted vista of vines, treetops, and distant temple towers, as though you stand atop the world itself. The wind gusts stronger here, tousling your hair and carrying the faint scent of orchids. In distant rain, you find a flat stone bench and settle down, legs dangling over the precipice. In the distance, thunder rumbles, a promise of a storm to come. For now, sunlight pours across the jungle like liquid gold. You close your eyes, tilt your head back, and let warmth wash over you. A sense of awe settles in your chest. Here, at the apex of human ambition and nature's resilience, you feel both insignificant and infinite. After a few moments, you rise and circle the summit, four corners marking the cardinal points. Carved in low relief, each corner bears a depiction of the world tree, its branches and roots connecting earth, sky, and underworld. Pilgrims once processed here, offering copal incense and chanting invocations. Historians still argue whether these summit rituals were exclusive to royalty or open to commoners on special occasions. Either way, you can picture those torchlit ceremonies, shadows dancing against stone as night fell. Standing at the pyramid's crest, you hear the distant drip of rain kicking off leaves. Soon, the canopy below will become a living river of water. But up here, you're suspended between ground and sky. You linger, heart, calm, and pulse, slowing, soaking in this panorama that stretches to eternity. When you finally descend, every step will feel a little less daunting because you've stood where gods once communed and retraced paths carved in stone a millennium ago. You pick your way down the pyramid's steep face, each footfall echoing faintly against the carved world tree reliefs, okay? And follow a narrow causeway that leads you into a wide open plaza. The air feels cooler here, like an exhale after climbing. You trail your fingertips along the low stone benches lining the square-roaded. Skull-shaped sculptures and shattered masks lie scattered around you, their hollow isocuts catching stray shafts of sunlight. A gentle breeze stirs dust motes. In lazy spirals, and the distant drip of water from mossy eaves turns into a soft percussion behind the buzz of cicadas. You step onto the plaza floor, and its cracked flagstones give under your boots with a hollow thunk, as if the ground itself is voicing relief at your arrival. This plaza looks like the lost city's ceremonial heart. It's a communal stage for spectacle and ritual. Archaeologists note that Maya plazas often spanned more than 1,000 square meters, serving as gathering places for public ceremonies and political announcements around AD 600 to 900 CE. Historians still argue whether this specific forecourt hosted open-air funerary rites for royal lineages or was reserved for masked ball games and theatrical dramas. Either way, you can almost hear the ghostly applause of onlookers. A crowd whose cheers have long turned to echoes. You skirt around a circle of 9 stone skulls, each nearly life-size and carved with uncanny precision. Their grins are unsettlingly real, canine-like teeth chiseled with careful intent. In one cluster, faded pigments cling to carved cheekbones, traces of red or ochre once used to accentuate the masks in daylight ceremonies. Fringe theorists believe these skulls acted as acoustic amplifiers. Performers would chant into their jaws, projecting sound across the plaza like an ancient megaphone system. If you catch yourself whispering to a skull and listening for an echo, don't worry, you've officially joined the ranks of amateur archaeologists. The breeze tugs at a tattered textile draped over a broken altar stone. You approach and brush fingers over its frayed edge. The fabric smells of dust and aged resin, faintly sweet like overheated sugar left in the sun. Its pattern interlocking zigzags and roundels resembles sun motifs found in distant highland weavings. Some scholars believe such textiles traveled along trade networks connecting this city to the Guatemalan highlands. Historians still argue whether these garments marked rank or were recycled from diplomatic gifts. Regardless, you can't help imagining this cloth once adorning a priest's shoulders during a dawn procession, long before you misplaced your own shoulder-brushing scarf in the hostel laundry. Across the plaza, you notice a pair of masks carved from pale limestone. Their features are elongated. High cheekbones, wide eyes, lips parted in silent chant. One sports a headdress of carved maize tassels, the other a serpent motif wrapping around its forehead. Such masks probably represented deities invoked during seasonal festivals. Archaeologists link maize symbolism to God, a day-agricultural deity whose cycle of death and rebirth mirrored the corn plant's own journey. Historians still argue whether performers wore these masks in live reenactments or simply displayed them as static icons. If you lean too close, you might detect faint flecks of green pigment, perhaps malachite dust from ceremonial face paint at the plaza's northern end. A low stone wall bears reliefs of skeletal figures dancing in procession. You crouch for a closer look. The carvings show bones stacked in anatomically accurate order, pelvises and femurs aligned like architectural columns. Mainstream researchers highlight that Mesoamerican cultures often incorporated death imagery not as morbid fetishes, but as affirmations of cyclical renewal. Yet fringe enthusiasts insist these dancing skeletons are invitations to necromantic gatherings and full moon seances. If you've packed that Ouija board, now might be the moment to unpack. Though I can't promise a callback from beyond your Boots crunch on a scattering of tiny obsidian flakes, leftover remnants of blade making that glint like black diamonds in the sun. You stoop, pluck one up, and turn it over in your palm. Obsidian was the scalpel of choice for ancient surgeons and bloodletter priests alike. Scholars still argue whether these flakes came primarily from local sources or were traded from highland volcanic zones hundreds of kilometers away. Either way, you're holding a cutting-edge tool, just not the kind you'd want near a zit. A distant rumble of thunder spurs a swirl of dust across the plaza's flat expanse. You pivot toward a stone platform where broken wooden poles protrude at odd angles, once support frames for ceremonial awnings. If you tilt your head and squint, the pattern almost forms a canopy of shifting shapes overhead. Modern canopy tours use zip lines and harnesses. Ancient Maya engineers used poles and palm thatch. Historians still argue whether those canopies sheltered elite audiences or demarcated sacred zones off limits to commoners. If you find yourself shading your eyes, you can pretend you're sitting under a VIP pavilion in a D800 just without the complimentary drinks. Exploring further, you cross a shallow channel carved into the plaza floor. Water trickles through, diverting rain runoff, an ingenious drainage system that kept this stage dry during tropical downpours. Archaeological studies of sites like Palenque confirm Maya mastery of hydraulic engineering. Fringe writers claim hidden culvert passages beneath the plaza once led to secret tomb chambers, accessible only via masked key-bearers. If you spot a loose flagstone, consider tapping it with that obsidian flake, though you might only get a finger full of dust. You pause at the plaza's center under a narrow beam of sunlight that breaks through the canopy. The light illuminates floating particles of dust and pollen, turning them into miniature fireflies. It feels sacred, like a spotlight on a long-forgotten performance. You lean back against a scorched altar, surface evidence of incense offerings burned here during festivals. The air still carries faint wisps of copal resin, the same incense that flickered across temple tops at sunrise. Historians still argue whether the sweet smoke was meant to ward off insects or literally smoke out uninvited spirits. A playful breeze snatches a feathered ornament from a mask fragment at your feet, lifting it in loops before settling it onto another skull sculpture. The feather looks almost alive, a callback to those serpent statues you'll glimpse under moonlight later. If you ever need proof that this plaza lives and breathes, watch how nature reclaims man-made artifacts with ballet-like grace. You sweep away a pile of leaves to reveal a carved stone platform inset with a circular depression, likely a seat for a throne or ritual chair. It's the social media influencer's dream perch, minus power outlets and Wi-Fi. Fringe vloggers now stage plaza yoga sessions here, chanting ancient mantras and posing against the backdrop of carved skulls. Historians still argue whether yogic postures and Hindu influences ever reached Mesoamerica, or if yoga here is strictly modern fusion. Either way, Downward Dog Among Skeletons has a certain gothic appeal. Stepping off the platform, you feel a distinct shift in energy, like crossing from spectator zone into the ritual arena itself. Shadows from surrounding pillars stretch across the plaza floor, creating alternating light and dark bands. Some say these chiaroscuro effects generated a drumbeat illusion as moving figures passed over them, intensifying dance performances. If you stand still long enough, you can almost hear the percussion echo in your bones, followed by your stomach growling because you didn't pack real snacks near the plaza edge. You spy a half-buried cache of ceramic mask pieces, fragmented. Visages painted white, black, and red. The glaze still gleams faintly under a thin layer of grime. These fragments likely represent failed examples discarded during mask production. Archaeologists point out that ancient workshops often left behind such production waste. Historians Still argue whether these broken pieces were ritually killed by burial to release their spiritual potency. If you feel tempted to collect one, remember museums frown on vacation souvenirs plus. You've already got that obsidian flake falling. Dusk slants across the square now, turning bone-white sculptures to ghostly silhouettes. You pause to let the shadows lengthen, dust swirling at your feet in slow eddies. The cicada's chorus deepens into an almost musical drone. You sense the plaza's dual nature, place of solemn remembrance and vibrant spectacle. These skulls and masks embody a culture that understood death not as final, but as part of a greater dance of existence. As twilight seeps in, you trace one last circle around the skull-littered ground. You brush fingers along a mask's broken jaw and whisper, "Thank you." The words feel private, an offering to unseen ancestors who linger in carved stone. Behind you, the jungle's green walls darken to shadow. Ahead, the path to the labyrinthine marketplace awaits, promising new wonders. You inhale the sweet scent of copal, carried on warm air, feeling a flicker of reverence mixed with sleepy anticipation. Stepping off the plaza and onto the trail beyond. You leave behind the skulls and masks, but their silent gazes follow you. Their hollow stares remind you that every performance, every ritual, is ephemeral yet somehow carved into eternity. As you walk toward marble stalls and barter shards, you carry their story with you, woven into your own nighttime odyssey through these lost cities. You step off the shaded causeway into a kaleidoscope of color and sound, weaving through rock-forged stalls that chant with the echoes of ancient vendors. Cool breeze drifts down the corridor of carved stone booths, lifting fragments of painted awnings overhead. Flecks of red, blue, and yellow still cling to wooden beams, their pigments cracked but defiant against time's relentless march. You brush past a low counter carved from bedrock, its surface worn smooth by centuries of elbow grease. The air pulses with the hum of imagined bartering merchants hawking cacao beans, obsidian tools, and jaguar hide cloaks in a language half remembered and half invented by your mind. Tucked beneath a flaking awning, series of niches once displayed. Goods, shells from coastal lagoons, feathered fans plucked from tropical birds, and ceramic jugs for serving frothy chocolate drinks. Archaeologists confirm that Maya marketplaces thrived on scheduled days, often every 5 days, according to the Teotihuacan calendar linking commerce to sacred cycles of time between AD 250 and 900. Historians still argue whether this corridor functioned as a permanent bazaar servicing local communities, or as a grand festival, market drawing merchants from distant lowlands. Either way, you can almost catch the scent of lavishly spiced tortillas trading hands here. You peer into one stall's shadowed recess and spot faint gouge marks in the stone, where flint blades were sharpened and obsidian flakes once glittered like fragments of midnight sky. A stray shard, still embedded in an earthen groove, flashes black and catches the sunlight filtering through overhead vines. Fringe lore insists that these obsidian bits were used not only for crafting knives but also for scrying portals to other dimensions, so if you glimpse a robed figure in your reflection, don't panic until you've checked your Instagram feed first as you navigate the twisting aisles. Your sandals crunch on scattered maize kernels, purple and gold, spilled long ago by distracted shoppers. You crouch to scoop one up, examining its miniature kernel labyrinthites, like holding a tiny galaxy in your palm. Local guides claim some traders believed maize grains could store memories of their growers. Eat one, and you'd inherit your farmer's wisdom. Personally, you'd rather stick to energy bars. But if you ever have flashbacks of being a prehistoric corn farmer, remember it wasn't me who planted that idea? A gentle breeze carries distant animal calls howler monkeys, parrots, and the low hiss of a coati scavenging for leftovers in the leafy undergrowth. You inhale the mingled aromas of damp earth, roasted chilies, and fermenting fruit pulps that still seep from rain-soaked thatch. A stray drop of rain falls through a hole in the awning, splashing on your wrist with chilly surprise, as if mocking the sun-baked steps you climbed moments ago. The juxtaposition of heat on the pyramid and cool droplets here makes you suspect that gods have a mischievous sense of humor. Along one side of the marketplace, you notice a raised platform, formerly a staging area for traders to display rare wares. Its edge bears a carving of a jaguar's paw, recalling the feline motifs you traced on that mossy monolith in Section 2. Jaguars were such universal power symbols that they merchandised themselves seriously. Imagine a Jaguar logo t-shirt. Today, historians still argue whether these paw prints marked a guild's emblem or signified a donation station for tribute goods. Either way, you hesitate to rest your pack here. Jaguars deserve respect, and ancient murals warn against sitting where kings once presided. In a narrow side alcove, you discover a basin hewn into bedrock, the market's communal water trough. Traders quenched their thirst and cleaned wounds here between haggling sessions. The basin still contains a residue of crushed cochineal dye, the brilliant red that transformed fabrics into sunset hues. Mainstream scholars note that cochineal production peaked in the highlands, then flowed down to lowland markets via intricate trade networks. Fringe enthusiasts, however, swear that dye derived from a mythical insect called the Iztac cochineal, rumored to produce colors unseen by modern eyes. If you dip a finger and see rainbow streaks, congratulations, you've unlocked the universe's secret palette. A passing breeze stirs the pennants strung between stalls, their faded patterns dancing like silent banners. You step beneath a canopy of woven reeds and glimpse a mosaic inlaid into the stone. Floor tiny chips of volcanic rock crafted into a stylized serpent devouring its own tail. Ouroboros. Maybe similar motifs appear in the highlands, suggesting shared iconography across distant realms. Historians still argue whether this symbol signified the cyclical nature of time, or served as a protective emblem for merchants against theft and misfortune. Fringe scribes propose that standing on the serpent's head grants traders prophetic visions, though you suspect they just wanted free press for their underground newsletter. Your stomach rumbles. Barter talk always makes you hungry, and you eye a shallow niche containing a cluster of clay bowls. They're decorated with geometric patterns chipped at the rims. Each bowl once filled with spiced maize porridge or tangy fruit sauces. If you were game, you could scoop up a handful of ancient crumbs, chew them thoughtfully, and tweet your gastronomic review. But you decide against ingesting centuries-old grit. Instagram doesn't cover food poisoning. Venturing deeper, you pass a tangle of low pillars arranged like a hedge maze. These columns once supported a roof of palm thatch, sheltering perishable goods from sun and rain. If you lean against one, feeling its smooth limestone polish beneath your palm, a testament to human touch across generations. A faint, distant drip catches your ear, reminding you of that sunken temple's mysterious algae glow. Here, water seeps through cracks and trickles across the stalls, leaving tiny moss gardens in its wake. Nature reclaims everything humble or grand. A crooked merchant's booth, now collapsed, reveals a small cache of ceramic weight spheres inscribed with numeric bars and dots. Maya traders used these weights to measure cacao beans, salt, and precious metals. Archaeologists discovered similar tools at Tikal's marketplace, indicating advanced commerce practices. Historians still argue whether these weights synchronized directly with the Teotihuacan calendar or operated on an independent system. If you start counting dots on your fingers, remember it's optional and your math teacher would approve. A pair of carved panels leans against a broken support beam, depicting a seated merchant holding a tray of goods. Their headdresses are elaborate, and their robes strewn with pendants shaped like stylized corncobs. The panel surfaces are so thin you almost mistake them for painted bark cloth rather than stone. You lift one carefully and catch a whiff of resin copal. Incense probably burned nearby to bless transactions. Modern New Age retreats now stage ancient market rituals here, complete with faux traders hawking crystal-infused cacao. Historians still argue whether such modern reenactments help or hinder genuine archaeological understanding. At least, the chocolate's probably safe. You turn a corner and spot an abrupt drop-off stone steps leading down to a lower corridor. Shadowed stalls, there once housed transient traders from the isthmus, bartering exotic goods like hummingbird feathers and seashell currency. You remember that fringe theory about the Aztec cochineal and wonder if you'll find a hidden niche with sea pearls glimmering faintly beneath dust? Historians still argue whether maritime merchants settled here seasonally or simply visited. During festival markets, a sudden gust ruffles debris across the floor, small bits of ceramic, broken reed fragments, and the occasional obsidian flake. It feels like the market itself is exhaling, sighing at your presence. You pause under what remains of a vibrant awning, adjusting your pack straps. Can almost hear voices climbing back from oblivion, calling out prices in a tongue half lost. Two-time, the sensation is both exhilarating and disorienting, like tuning into a radio station broadcasting a channel from a forgotten planet. As you stand there, you notice a carved footprint, imprinted in the stone floor, a deliberate cast. Not natural wear. It's oversized, heel to toe, with toe marks splayed wide. Some say these were markers showing where tribute bearers queued. Others insist they're the signature of a giant deity who patronized the market. Historians still argue whether such footprints denote measurement units or are purely symbolic. You slip your foot into the groove and grin, awkwardly, because it's deeper than you expected, and you have to hop out fast, lest you embarrass yourself in front of invisible spectators. The market's exits beckon to the south and east, leading toward loom workshops and potter's kilns. But before you leave, you lean against a final stall's weathered column and trace the carved spiral that curls around its base. Spirals represent wind and movement, the very essence of commerce and exchange. You breathe in the scented breeze-damp earth mingled with distant hearth smoke, and let it fill you with the thrill of discovery, slipping through the final arch. You step back onto the path that led you here, the marketplace's ghosts lingering in your mind like unfinished conversations. Behind you, the carved stalls stand silent, their colors drained, but their spirit intact. Ahead, the eclipse ritual chambers await, promising new wonders under the watchful eye of sun and moon. Walk on, your footsteps carrying the whispers of ancient traders down the winding corridors of history. You slip through a low vine-draped portal and crouch inside a vaulted sanctum that hums with latent energy. The stone walls curve overhead like a rib cage, enclosing you in cool shade. Your breath condenses in the dim light, and you can almost taste the coppery tang of ancient incense still lingering in the air. Tiny gaps in the masonry align perfectly to a thin shaft of sunlight dancing across the chamber floor and aperture, calibrated to the sun's path. It's eerie how the beam slices through the gloom, like a spotlight on a secret stage. And you realize this place was built for moments when day trembled and night encroached. Solar eclipses. Mainstream scholars confirm that. Maya astronomers tracked solar and lunar eclipses using sophisticated tables recorded in the Dresden Codex, predicting celestial events centuries before analogous records appeared in Europe. Historians still argue whether this sanctum served exclusively for eclipse viewing, or doubled as a sanctuary for rain-making ceremonies tied to Chak, the storm deity. Either way, the design feels deliberate, every stone set to channel light and shadow. Crafting an ephemeral drama in stone. Leaning forward, you trace carved glyphs circling the central aperture, stylized suns, crescent moons, and dots marking days. These markings mirror eclipse counts, a testament to the Maya's astronomical precision. A stray spiderweb quivers as you pass, and you remember the shimmering webs in Section 2's monolith grove, where Duladon filaments looked like fragile chandeliers. Here, the web seems purposeful and natural hush that dampens your footsteps, amplifying that low hum. You crouch on cool flagstone and run a hand along a carved bench lining the wall. The surface is smooth where priests once knelt, scraping their knees through rituals timed to celestial alignments. Fringe researchers whisper that these benches were polished by ceremonial crystal goggles priests wore to stare at eclipses without dying of retinal overexposure. If you spot anyone making look at solar eclipse TikTok content here, blame these crackpot theories. A soft breeze stirs through a side slit, carrying the scent of copal resin mixed with damp moss. Your shirt prickles against your back as the air trembles. It feels alive, as if exhaling in synchrony with the sun's movement. Outside, a thunderstorm brews. Those same clouds you glimpsed atop the pyramid have drifted in. Rain will pulverize the jungle's roar into a white noise you'll navigate by memory. But in this chamber, time pauses. The outside world dims to a murmur. Your hand brushes over an alcove, holding a small, flat mirror carved from polished hematite. In dim torchlight, it would catch glints of fire and moonlight alike. Mainstream evidence shows that elite Maya used reflective stone mirrors to signal across plazas or to invoke celestial bodies. Some mirrors from Teotihuacan's great compound date to the 4th century CE. Historians still argue whether these mirrors functioned as practical signaling devices or as ritual tools to summon deities. You pick it up and see a distorted reflection of your face, framed by stone ribs. If you use this to check your hair, at least the humidity's doing wonders for your natural highlights. You lean the mirror into the beam of Cincius. When you lean the mirror into the beam of slifer of light rebounds, painting a golden streak. On the opposite wall, it's like setting off a disco ball with one precise angle, ancient rave vibes in stone. You half expect torches to ignite spontaneously or ghostly priests to shuffle in chanting. Instead, you hear your own breath, steady and deliberate. If you tried this in your living room, you'd probably set off the smoke alarm here. Feels like a calibrated experiment in cosmic choreography. A faint beetle scrabbles across the bench, its exoskeleton glinting like jewel-encrusted armor. You recall the beetles pinned in amber you passed in Section 4's sunken temple. Specimens that preserved entire ecosystems. Here, the beetle seems content to play understudy in a drama written eons before. You resist the urge to name it, sir. Hums a lot and shift attention back to the eclipse slot dot above. A narrow slit frames a slice of sky-tinted storm gray. You squint, imagining the sun crossing an invisible meridian, its light waning as the moon drifts into place overhead. Fringe aficionados claim that, during an eclipse, this chamber resonates with ultrasonic frequencies, vibrations that induce trances so deep participants nearly levitate. Historians still argue whether any Maya ritual involved actual levitation, or if these claims stem from shaky psychic research. If you start floating, at least test your pockets for dropped energy bars first. The carved glyphs on the floor form a concentric pattern. Dots and bars marking 20-day cycles and 30-month year essential elements of the Teotihuacan sacred calendar. Maya priests used these cycles to time ceremonies for eclipses, weaving cosmic events into the rhythms of agriculture and astrology. You crouch to inspect a Barandon inscription, your fingertips picking out flecks of red pigment caught in its grooves remnants of cochineal dye. Back in Section 3, you paddled through canals, smelling of wild cinnamon. Here, the air's sweetness hints at ritual feasts that once accompanied eclipse watching. You stretch out your legs and settle cross-legged on the smooth stone. Your knees protest, reminding you that yoga apps would have sold you a guided eclipse meditation for $30. But here, naked air and ancient stone provide the perfect setting. You close your eyes and imagine the chamber plunging into semi-darkness, the pulse of the jungle muted. The eclipse beam sliding along the floor, pausing at a carved marker as if counting down the final seconds before totality. A rumble overhead, could be thunder, could be the earth shifting. If plate tectonics start humming in harmony with the chamber, you'll have the ultimate ASMR track. You lean back against the wall, letting the curvature of the stone cradle you. Every breath syncs with the hum of history, a resonance that makes you feel both infinitesimal and intimately connected to civilizations that spoke the language of stars. You open your eyes to that single shaft of light, now splitting into two flickers as clouds drift across. It's delicate, like a candle's flame in a draft. If you were here at equinox, you'd witness a serpent's shadow slithering down a pyramid face. Here, you get a serene ballet of light and stone. Fringe storytellers rave that when the shadow passes, a hidden door slides open, revealing scrolls of prophecies. Historians still argue whether any physical door existed or if the hidden door is purely metaphorical. If you bang on the walls expecting a hollow sound, you might just confirm the stone's solid alibi. High on the dome above, its faded plaster hints at once vibrant murals. Feathered serpents entwined with celestial symbols. A tipped fragment lies nearby, its pigments so vivid you can almost see the turquoise glimmer of quetzal feathers. Archaeological digs at Oxkintok uncovered similar vault murals dating to the 7th century CE, depicting eclipse rituals alongside solar deities. Historians still argue whether those vaults served as astronomical amphitheaters or secret initiation chambers for priesthood novices. Either way, these fragments bear witness to ceilings once alive with color, now reclaimed by earth and time. You rise slowly, bones creaking like ancient doors, and step back toward the entrance. Light spills in, warming your face. Outside, the jungle's chorus has resumed birds, insects, and the distant slap of falling rain. Stepping over the threshold, you feel the sanctuary's hush lift, the outside world snapping into focus, like fingers peeling back a dream. Before you lie two paths, one leading east back to the labyrinthine marketplace, the other descending into the hall of painted beasts. If you follow the marketplace trail, you'll rejoin the bustle of stone stalls under peeling awnings. If you choose the beasts hall, color and myth wait in damp corridors. Historians still argue which direction served as the ceremonial exit. For eclipse ceremonies, did priests process toward painted murals of celestial creatures? Or did they emerge into public squares to share their visions? You pause, weighing your options, feeling that gentle tension between sky and earth, sun and stone. A bead of water drips from a vine overhead, splashing on your shoulder. The echo traces your spine, a reminder that even sanctuaries aren't immune to jungle humidity. You smirk at your damp shirt. No AC, no snack breaks, just pure celestial. Gathering your pack, you step away, the engraved aperture receding behind you. You carry with you the hush of eclipses, the hum of stone, and the gleam of that hematite mirror. A fragment of ancient star watchers, TOOLKIT, dot as you proceed down the mossy path. Remember the canal's glowing larvae and the monoliths whispered secrets. Each step echoes rituals older than modern sleepovers. Your journey continues, stitched together by light, water, and stone an odyssey through lost cities and sky-watched sanctuaries. You step away from the eclipse chamber and follow a damp corridor carved into the rock, vines parting as you move, and the faint scent of moss curling in the humid air. The floor slopes gently downward toward a much larger space where walls rise, like theater sets painted with ancient dramas. Here, the Hall of Painted Beasts stretches before you, its vaulted ceiling dark with water stains and drips echoing like slow drum beats. Your boots thud softly on flagstones, still sticky with algae, and each step leaves a faint footprint that the dripping water will wash away by morning. The murals unfold in riotous, color-stylized jaguars prowling through flaming cornstalks, feathered serpents undulating around glyph-laden pillars, and armadillo-like creatures stamped with sunburst patterns. You reach out, finger grazing a dew-slick cheek of a painted feline, and you almost feel fur under your fingertip. The pigment threads derive from cochineal insects, blues from ground turquoise, yellows from clay and limestone cling tenaciously, flecked by mold and washed by rain. Archaeologists date similar murals at Bonampak to around AD 790, celebrating wars, rituals, and mythic creatures in vivid polychrome. Historians still argue whether these beasts were mere decorative flourishes or allegorical guardians, embodying clan lineages. A sudden drip startles you. A bead of water falls from the ceiling, splashing on a painted feather plume, and the mural shudders as if exhaling. You brush away a glistening rivulet from a serpent's eye, revealing a tiny spiral glyph beneath. Fringe theorists claim those spirals encode sonic frequencies, so if you hum a bass note here at midnight, the walls will hum back. You pause, humming a low. But the only response comes from a startled lizard darting across a painted sunburst, its tail flicking in alarm. The vaulted roof arches overhead like a giant turtle shell, ribs of solid limestone dimly outlined by blackened soot from ancient torchlight. You can almost hear the crackle of resin-dipped wicks carried through the hall by priests leading nighttime ceremonies. Mainstream experts point out that Maya painters applied lime plaster and then layered pigments while wet, creating durable murals that could last centuries. Yet you can't help noticing the ceiling's upper reaches have flaked away, exposing bare masonry where plaster fell in sheets, moving deeper. The floor's gentle slope carries you toward a fresco depicting a crowd of zoomorphic dancers humans. In beast costumes, jaguar masks perched on heads, claws tipped in bone. Their bodies arc in ritual dance, measuring the hall's floor like a built-in dance platform. If you crouch low, you can imagine their shadows elongating across the walls in flickering torchlight. Fringe storytellers argue that if you stand in the center and impersonate a jaguar roar, the pigments will glow under low-light phosphorescent paint, though most scholars dismiss that as modern art installation envy. A breeze threads through a half-open portal at the far end, stirring the scrolls of vines that dangle like curtains. You inhale the mingled aromas of damp stone, decaying orchids dripping overhead, and the lingering sweetness of copal incense that someone lit days ago. You breathe deeply, remembering the scent of jasmine from Section 1's hidden threshold and the temps of canal water in Section 3. Here, those memories swirl together in a single inhalation of ancient atmosphere. One wall bears a long procession of creatures you don't recognize, a bull-like beast sporting a feathered crest, a fluted-necked bird with spear-like beak, and a scaly reptile whose head merges into a stylized sun disk. Each is rendered with surprising anatomical precision muscles, defined beneath skin, feathers layered with brush strokes so delicate you'd swear an eagle had posed for the artist. Archaeologists identify some as mythic Tzutz creatures mentioned in Maya codices, believed to patrol the threshold between worlds. Historians still argue whether these beasts were purely mythical or based on rare animals encountered during distant trade expeditions as you step closer to the corner. You notice the floor here is sunken by a few inches, forming a natural basin where water pools and reflects upside-down versions of painted beasts. You crouch where 3 tiles meet, and your reflection joins the parade of creatures. It's disorienting, like watching yourself join a ghost dance. Fringe photographers now stage shoot here at dawn, capturing mirror images that look like surreal NFT art. If you ever sell one, disclaim that it's an homage, not an original Maya selfie. You stand and run your hand along the low stone ledge running beneath the murals, spotting faint indentations that could once have held wooden beams too. Support ceremonial garlands. The edge is smooth in places. It's polished by centuries of brushstrokes and offerings placed on its jaguar teeth, shell beads, and twisted corn husk wreaths. One spot still holds a fossilized imprint of a corn kernel, yellow as sunspots. Picture: ancient worshippers placing maize here to honor agricultural spirits. You'll find echoes of that ritual in the sunken causeway where harvest prayers once drifted on water. A deep, echoing drip booms from the roof, and you realize the halls. Stillness amplifies every microsound. Your breathing, the rustle of your shirt, even the distant slap of your own boots on stone resonates like part of an unfinished symphony. It's easy to forget you're thousands of years removed from the artist's brushstrokes. You crouch before a panel depicting a jaguar-headed deity presenting an earthen bowl, presumably filled with sacrificial offerings. Jaguar deities were linked to rulership and the underworld gatekeepers of both power and mysterious realms. Curiously, you spot a small hole drilled into the bottom edge of one wall, next to a painted jaguar's paw. It's perfectly round, clearly made with a stone, all after the plaster dried. Fringe colonialists once claimed these holes were for inserting metal rods to hang. Spanish conquistador heads as trophies, a macabre rumor that historians still argue has any basis. In all likelihood, they served as hooks for ceremonial textiles. Though nothing but rusted nails remain, the hall's far portal yawns open to the humid corridor beyond. A murky light beckoning you on. You pause, tracing a clawed foot of a painted beast, and you half expect the creature's mouth to flick open. Instead, you hear a faint skitter behind you, a cluster of tiny geckos drying their bellies on sun-warmed stones. The geckos freeze, their bodies blending into the mural's scaly reptile pattern. It's a masterful camouflage, whether nature or artist conspired. You step back, chuckling at your own jumpiness. Above the portal, a collapsed ceiling lintel has fallen inward, revealing tiny flecks of gold-colored mica embedded in the plaster sparkles that once brightened the hall with sunlight. Mainstream. Studies show mica was used sparingly in elite murals to create shimmering highlights. Historians still argue whether the mica came from local deposits or traded from distant highland mines. Fringe treasure hunters gasp at the thought of gold here, but a closer look shows it's just glittering mineral dust. Soft glow seeps through the archway from the corridor's torch holders. It's modern reproductions placed by site managers to guide visitors. The orange light flickers and dances across the last bead of mural before the portal. A scene depicting a crouching jaguar poised to leap into the night. You stand in its path and catch the lantern beam in your hair. A spotlit cameo in a tableau of painted beasts. It feels like an initiation. Now you're part of this living gallery. You turn for one last look. The curved walls enveloping you. Each painted beast frozen mid-snarl or mid-flight, as if waiting for a cue to spring to life. The echo of dripping water and distant bird calls weaves with torchlight to create a multi-sensory tapestry that lingers in your mind. You step through the portal, leaving behind frescoes streaked by rainwater and time, carrying their colors imprinted. In your memory, ahead lies the serpent's shrine under moonlight, silver statues coiled beneath the stars. If you think these painted beasts were magical, wait until you see real stone serpents glowing at night. You straighten your pack, adjust your flashlight, and move on. Okay. Letting the Hall of Painted Beasts' vivid procession guide your steps deeper into the lost city's nocturnal mysteries. You step out of the Hall of Painted Beasts and cross a low, grassy embankment. The only sound, the soft rustle of night birds shifting overhead. Ahead, an open courtyard unfolds under a sky smeared with silver moonlight. Every vine and stone bathed in an otherworldly glow. You kneel at the edge of a circular plaza where coiling serpent statues rise like ancient sentinels, their bodies curving in graceful arcs around a central altar. The moonlight glints off wet moss clinging to their scales, turning each ridge and groove into liquid silver. As you breathe, you taste the cool night air, laced with the scent of damp earth and blooming moonflowers. And you feel awfully pleased you skipped that extra energy bar back at the plaza. These snake sculptures recall the famed serpent columns at Chichen Itza and Cohanlic, where feathered serpent imagery symbolized Quetzalcoatl's dual role as sky deity and bringer of knowledge. Mainstream archaeologists date many of these shrines to the post-classic period, around AD 901–200, when serpent worship surged across Mesoamerica. Historians still argue whether these coiling figures represented underworld guardians guiding souls home or protective talismans warding off malevolent spirits. Either way, the artistry you kneel before is a testament to centuries of craftsmanship and sacred devotion. You stretch out a hand to let your fingers drift along the cool stone, tracing each sculpted scale as if reading Braille. The texture is slick where moss has been worn away by centuries of offerings, quail feathers, jade beads, and tiny snail shell necklaces left at the serpent's open jaws. Fringe voices insist that if you whisper your deepest secrets into a serpent's ear, your words will coil into the underworld and return as prophetic dreams. If you confide tonight that you binge-watched an entire season of your favorite show in one sitting, don't blame the serpents when your pillow starts whispering spoilers above you. Okay. Moonlight filters through a canopy of ceiba and kapok trees, spotlighting one serpent's head as it arches toward a broken lintel. You crouch lower, sliding your hand beneath its jaws, and find a shallow cavity once used as a water receptacle for ritual libations. Rainwater pooled here by design, cleansing the shrine before each ceremony. Experts note that many such shrines incorporated hydraulic features to channel seasonal rains, marking the serpents as mediators between Earth's moisture and celestial forces. Historians still argue whether water in these basins symbolized life-giving blood or cosmic tears, shed by grieving deities. A faint mist drifts in from the jungle's edge, carrying the distant echo of crickets and frogs. It curls around a pair of smaller serpents that flank the central figure, their tails entwined in a double helix. You grin at the scientific pun nature's DNA motif carved in stone a millennium before Watson and Crick. Fringe cryptographers claim those double coils encode star maps of the Milky Way's serpent constellation, urging midnight visitors to align their bodies along the scale patterns for astral communion. If you position your arm just so, you might summon your next horoscope reading, though your phone's astrology app probably does the trick faster. You rise slowly and circle the plaza's perimeter, moonlight slicing shadows in half as you move. In one niche, a serpent's open maw frames a worn altar slab stained dark with old offerings. You crouch to inspect. Dried petals remain in the stone's crevices, their color ghostly in the silver light. These petals likely came from juvenile ceiba blooms, symbolic offerings meant to renew fertility and life's cyclical rhythms. Some ethnographies propose that these offerings linked serpent worship directly to agricultural rites, soaring bountiful harvests. Historians still argue whether the serpents presided over ceremonies invoking rain deities like Chalk, or were primarily venerated as cosmic sky serpents. Leaning back, you take note of the starlit sky. Constellations swirl overhead, and you remember. Tracing the spider constellations beneath the monoliths. Or paddling through phosphorescent canal tunnels, where larvae blinked like tiny stars. Here, sky and stone converge in a hush so deep it resonates in your chest. You imagine priests in flowing robes standing behind you, chanting in rhythmic cadence as torches circled the plaza's edge. Fringe ritualists claim that if you perform the same chants, today complete with echoing conch shell horns, you can still awaken latent energies in these stones. If you try that, maybe record it. At worst, you'll gather some curious YouTube comments. Behind you, the jungle breathes. Soft exhale of tree frogs and night insects. You hear the distant drip-drip of water pooling in hidden cisterns beneath the plaza stones, just as you heard earlier in the sunken temple's aquatic chambers. The continuity feels profound. Water carving its way through stone, whether in submerged steps or serpent basins. You realize these lost cities were threaded by canals and aqueducts, linking shrines, plazas, and the very lifeblood of its people. You kneel once more before the central serpent, placing both hands flat on the cold, mossy platform before it. The stone hums under your palms in illusion, perhaps, but the sensation is real enough to send goosebumps along your arms. While mainstream researchers caution against attributing paranormal properties to carved stone, they acknowledge that such haptic experiences shape worshippers' perceptions of the sacred. Historians still argue whether the probable vibrations were intentional acoustic effects or simply natural resonances in volcanic limestone. A soft breeze picks up, dislodging a handful of fine moss from the serpent's back. The clump drifts down onto your sleeve like a gentle benediction. You brush it away, tucking it into your pocket as an impromptu talisman. Fringe collectors would pay good money for authentic jungle moss rumored to have protective charms. You start charging blue-chip prices on eBay. Just remember, you heard it here first. You rise and back away, letting the moon's glow wash over the intertwined forms of the serpent quartet. From this angle, their coils form a perfect spiral and infinite loop, guiding your gaze inward toward the shrine center. It reminds you of the spirals hidden beneath the moss in the monolith grove, or the glyph-marked spirals beneath the water in the eclipse chamber. These patterns are a visual mantra, woven into every corner of this city's sacred architecture. In the shrine's hush, you find yourself whispering a thank you on impulse as old as the moss you pocketed. You think of the tiny snail shell necklaces, the quail feathers, the jade beads nestled in stone recesses. Each a story-holding artifact left by someone else kneeling under the moon. You stand and cast one last glance at the serpent's polished jaws, imagining them breathing lunar mist into the air, stepping off the plaza. You feel the cushion of damp moss underfoot, a soft carpet laid out by centuries of leaf litter. Ahead, a narrow causeway leads deeper into the maze of moonlit ruins, toward a sacrificial causeway rumored to bear ochre stains still vivid at midnight. Historians still argue whether those stains mark sacrifices for sun deities or simply the residue of plant-based dyes. You shrug, adjust your flashlight, and follow the path, leaving behind the serpent shrine's silvery hush. The next chapter awaits, stained in ochre and echoing with ritual footsteps and ointment for your nocturnal odyssey. You emerge from the serpent shrine's silvery hush and find yourself at the entrance to a narrow causeway stretching across a shallow chasm. The stone underfoot is streaked with ochre hues, rust splashes that look like abstract art, or perhaps ceremonial graffiti left by pilgrims long gone. As you step onto the causeway, each footfall echoes against the low walls flanking the pathway. and you can almost feel the pulse of every procession that crossed here, laden with offerings and prayers. A mist drifts up from the chasm below, dampening your boots and carrying the scent of moist earth and wild oregano. It's the same herbal note you caught near the sunken temple's reflective pools. Mainstream archaeologists identify such pathways as Sakbib White Roads, engineered between AD 300 and 900, linking temples and plazas to foster trade, pilgrimage, and political unity. This particular causeway, however, is unique. Its stones were deliberately coated with red ochre pigment, perhaps to symbolize blood or life force during rites of passage. Historians still argue whether that red wash commemorates actual sacrifices made along this span or simply marks the trail of red-dyed cotton banners dragged by ritual dancers. Either way, you can't help but imagine priests clad in feathered headdresses striding eastward at dawn, their sandals kicking up flurries of ochre-like fiery sparks as you pace forward. The low parapet walls on either side are inscribed with shallow barrelifs, stylized skull faces, looping serpents, and parallel grooves where rods once slotted wooden railings. You pause to run your fingers along a skull's hollow eye sockets, smooth as river-polished stone, and recall the Plaza of Bones in Section 6, where life and death danced in carved masks and whispered schoolore. A lizard scuttles away, his tail flicking across an ochre smear, as though he's been dabbed in ceremonial paint himself. If you blink, you might swear you see claw marks leading into the chasm, a callback to those lab-grown root tunnels under the monoliths. Halfway across, the causeway dips into a gentle arch. Through a gap in the low wall, you peer down at a trickle of red-tinged water pooling below. It seems to glimmer with a viscous sheen like the world's worst smoothie bowl. Fringe theorists claim the red hue comes not from ochre, but from ancient blood residues preserved by unique mineral conditions. They urge brave travelers to taste the water for proof, though most stomachs and health codes strongly advise against it. Historians still argue whether any real blood ceremonies occurred on this stretch, or if later generations applied red pigments in homage only. You step down onto a patch where the causeway broadens into a small bridge platform. Here, merchants once paused to trade goods between plazas on either side, cacao beans for pottery shards, quetzal feathers for jade beads. You imagine the clatter of woven baskets and the clink of obsidian blades being priced in dots and bars. A cold breeze gusts through, carrying a faint echo of marketplace banter from Section 7. You'd half expect to see ceramic bowls winking at you from hidden corners, still waiting to be scooped up in a barter frenzy. Looking back, you notice the causeway's ochre stains form patterned zigzag lines that might map seasonal cycles or simply decorate the road like festive bunting. A stray fragment of cloth lies tangled in a groove, its fibers stiff with time. You brush it lightly, and the textile crumbles into a confetti of threads. Some enthusiasts propose these were remnants of sacrificial garments, robes worn by those offering themselves to the gods. Historians still argue whether self-sacrifice was literal or metaphorical in these rites. If the cloth once bore human hair or jade beads sewn into its hem, it's long since eroded by winds and time. You pause under an opening where the low wall gives way, revealing a view of two flanking staircases carved into the canyon walls. In the distance, you catch sight of frescoed chambers where eclipse rituals took place, and you swear you can see that beam of sunlight still slicing through the vault. If you squint, you might spot the faint spiral glyphs you hummed at in Section 8. The layers of ritual space overlap here. Processions moving from eclipse, sanctuaries to sacrifice stages to serpent shrines, to choreography spanning centuries. A sudden drip splashes on your shoulder, and you look up too. Seawater seeping through a crack overhead, falling like a timid waterfall onto the ochre-streaked stone. The repeated drips form a percussion line, echoing Section 4's sunken temple symphony. You smile at the recurring motif, water carving through stone. Whether in subterranean pools or open-air bridges, you wipe the wet spot off your shirt now. Portable AC or crocodile dung sunscreen trick will help you here. Pressing onward, you reach a slight rise where the causeway narrows again. The walls on either side slope inward, creating a corridor effect. Here, the red pigment deepens to a darker maroon, almost black in places. You crouch to inspect a splatter pattern on the wall. Looks eerily like handprints. Fringe storytellers allege these preserved hand shapes come from ritual participants pressing palms against the walls during sweet bath-like rites, leaving imprints that lasted through ages. Historians still argue whether these marks were intentional votive signatures or merely the result of pigment. Runoff pooling in hand-shaped hollows. You stand and run a hand along the corridor roof cool. Limestone marred by ossified root tendrils, weaving in cracks. You recalled the monolith grove in Section 2, where tree roots hugged stones like creatures frozen mid-embrace. Here, the plant life intrudes more delicately, as if giving the pathway a final blessing before reclaiming it. A thin tendril brushes your cheek, and you catch a hint of jasmine, again nature's scented callback to the hidden threshold in Section 1. As the corridor opens, you find yourself on a broad central causeway. Its surface now bare limestone, uncoated, but framed by raised platforms. In the moonlight, those platforms look like stages where sacrificial victims were displayed before their final procession. Archaeologists note that platform altars sometimes aligned with cardinal directions. They are steps used by priests presenting captives to the cardinal winds. Historians still argue whether these exhibitions were public spectacles or restricted to elite audiences. Whatever the case, you imagine the hushed torches flickering, murmured prayers. The quiet step of water priests walking across ochre stones. A gust brings the distant rumble of drums from the ball court in. Section 13. Though you're still far. From that arena, the low-frequency beat travels through stone. If you tilt your head, you might even hear muffled cheers of a nocturnal game under torchlight. It's as if the city's pulse remains hidden in every stone and corridor. You take a moment to lean against a parapet, the ochre pigment rubbing off on your forearm, staining your skin like war paint. You flick the pigment off in small flakes, each falling like an ember into the chasm below. The spray of orange against dark water looks almost like fireworks. If these stones could talk, they'd narrate a ceremony of initiation anointing. Novices with red dust before leading them into the valley of the dead and back again. A gecko scuttles past your boot. Its belly bright green in the moonlight. You bend down and watch as it pauses on an ochre smear, blending so perfectly you almost miss it. In Section 9's painted beasts, lizards hid in murals here. They camouflage themselves on sacrificial red. Nature's own fringe camouflage tutorial. When you finally reach the causeway's end, you cross a final lintel carved with a twin figure. One side a human kneeling, the other a skeletal figure handing over a red banner. You step under it deliberately, as if enacting the symbolic transition. From life to death to afterlife. Your boots clunk on a stone bearing concentric circles, perhaps. Marking the end of one journey and the start of another. Beyond lies a small plaza where an ochre-stained basin awaits. Rites of purification after a sacrifice. You catch the faint glow of moss-draped pillars beyond, promising the sun-drenched observatory's dust-laden walls ahead. Historians still argue whether that basin's water was rinsed out daily or left to collect sacred rainfalls. Fringe mystics swear a drop from it grants visions of ancestral memories. Just don't blame me when you dream you're wearing those sacrificial robes you left behind. Stepping off the causeway and onto the next plaza's flagstones. You feel. The red dust fall away from your feet, particles sifting between your toes. You leave behind the ochre bridge blood of the gods, path of pilgrims, scarlet thread weaving through centuries of ritual drama. Ahead, vaulted halls await your footfalls. Once more, carrying your journey deeper into a tapestry of stone, water, and sky. You climb a gentle rise and emerge onto a broad terrace etched with concentric circles and narrow channels that catch sunlight like cosmic sundials. The heat here presses down, wrapping your skin in a sun-warmed embrace, and every stone seems to radiate stored daylight, as though midday never left. Before you stands a low stone wall pierced by circular apertures. Perfectly round holes etched into the limestone in a precise arc. You lean forward, squinting through the nearest aperture, and see the jungle's horizon framed like a living telescope, sunbeams cutting through the gloom in blazing ribbons. These apertures recall the E-group complex at Teotihuacan, or platforms, and sightlines align to solstices and equinoxes, allowing Maya skywatchers to mark the solar year. As early as 350 BCE, archaeologists confirm that these structures functioned as rudimentary observatories, guiding agricultural calendars and ceremonial cycles. Historians still argue whether this particular terrace served strictly for astronomical tracking or doubled as a ceremonial stage for dawn pageantry. Either way, you can practically hear the chorus of drums greeting sunrise. You step along the terrace, your boots crunching on pebbly infill, and peer through the next aperture. It frames a distant temple peak, sun splashed at its crown, creating a zigzag pattern of light across your vision. The play of shadows reminds you of the chiaroscuro. Bands in the Plaza of Bones, Section 6, and the serpent scales under moonlight. Section 10. You blink and wish you'd packed sunglasses, though that'd ruin the authentic crop of sweat beating on your forehead. A gentle breeze stirs, carrying the scent of sun-baked earth mingled with flowering guava trees. You close your eyes, breathe deeply, and taste a hint of smoky copal incense wafting up from a distant courtyard. The air pulses with low frequency, hums either distant cicadas or the ghosts of chanting priests. Fringe conjecture posits that these apertures weren't just for sight, but also acted as acoustic resonators, amplifying sacred chants so far-flung audiences could hear them. If you bow your head and hum an octave lower, you might summon a sonic echo worthy of a cathedral, but don't expect Dolby Surround. Peering through the third aperture, you catch sight of the rising sun, but something's odd. It's on select mornings. Rumors say a phantom ring of light appears around the lens, like a solar corona trapped in stone. Fringe theorists claim this effect proves alien involvement, coining the term Stargate beam. Historians still argue whether the ring is a natural lens flare or deliberate. Optical magic achieved by polishing the aperture's inner edges 2mm precision. Personally, you'd settle for a decent Instagram shot rather than first contact. You walk the length of the wall until the final hole frames a patch of jungle canopy so distant it seems to drift like a green ocean. Around this aperture's rim, you spot faint, grooves, deliberate chisel marks, forming subtle notches. These might be measurement calibrations, marking sunrises, seasonal shifts. Maya astronomers famously use such sight tubes to time maize, planting, and ceremonial fairs. Some scholars argue these apertures synced with specific star risings, Sirius the Pleiades, rather than merely solar events. If you catch a twinkling at dawn, don't assume Pixie Hollow is calling. Glancing down, you notice engraved glyphs running below the apertures, clusters of bars and dots that tick off 20-day counts. The Teotihuacan calendar's pulse is etched here, a constant reminder that time itself was sacred. You run a fingertip over a barn-dawn inscription, smudging a bit of ochre from Section 11's causeway into the groove. silent callback between sacrifice and skywatching. That red dust sticks stubbornly like a souvenir you can't wash out of your boots. Mid-terrace. A shallow trench channels rainwater into a carved basin at the terrace's end. The basin's lip bears a stylized sunburst relief, its rays pointing to each aperture in turn. Expert stonemasons carved this hydraulic system to flush debris and keep sightlines clear on early weatherproofing hack. Fringe survivalists now tout it as an ancient self-cleaning window system, perfect for those avoiding stair lifts and washing chores. If you tried installing one at home, your HOA would scream heritage violation. The terrace's far end rises into a small platform shaded by ceiba tree roots that drape over the stones like woven curtains. You step onto it and find circular depressions in the floor lined with the porous ware. Wooden poles once supported sunshade canopies or perhaps ceremonial banners. You imagine early astronomers standing there in feather-trimmed cloaks, hair whipped by breeze, murmuring predictions of droughts or harvest feasts. Historians still argue whether such platforms were open-air classrooms for apprentices or reserved for elite. Priesthood in sealed dress rituals. You take a seat on the platform's edge, legs dangling over the sloping terrace, and close your eyes. The terrace hums, wind grazing stone, distant bird calls, the occasional drip of water from overhanging roots. And you let your mind drift to earlier passage, which is glowing canal tunnels, section 3, dripping eclipse. Chambers, section 8, each echo of water and light woven into a continuous narrative. Opening your eyes, you peer through the central aperture just as a shaft of morning sun splits the lens. It's projecting a circular beam onto the opposite wall. The disk of light moves imperceptibly, inch by inch, tracing a path over hieroglyphs. It hits a carved marker, a stylized maze. Kerneland illuminates it like a spotlight on a stage star. You grin at the theatrical flourish. Ancient producers knew how to stage a sunrise surprise. Fringe dramatists now stage sunrise theater here, complete with reenactors and fog machines. Historians still argue whether any original performances involve pyrotechnics or just rice flake confetti. Sunlight shifts again, the beam elongates, and your chest fills with a warm glow, literal and metaphorical. You lean against the carved wall, closing your eyes and letting the light seep through your lids. The beam's glow bathes your cheeks, reminiscent of that first clearing's dappled morning light in section 1. Time folds in on itself. The moment you arrived under judgment-free moss and the instant you witness cosmic choreography, you rise to follow a faint trail winding off the terrace's edge, where low benches once held skygazers. With quipus for note-taking, those knotted cords you imagined floating on canal water. You step over a half-buried stone table, its surface etched with star map patterns that align with Orion's belt and the Milky Way's dark rifts. Some archaeoastronomers suggest these patterns chart Venus's path, though mainstream scholars debate whether the Maya tracked Venus as morning star exclusively or also as evening harbinger of war. If you peer at the faded star map, you might know if interplanetary diplomacy is due. Ahead, a narrow staircase spirals down into shadow, leading to a courtyard ringed by low platforms, possibly for offerings to lunisolar deities. You glance back at the sunlit apertures, still blazing behind you. The contrast of dazzling daylight and impending shade thrills you. After the relentless sun, the cool hush below will feel like stepping into a dream. You take a final look at that central beam angled through stone, the city's heartbeat made visibly, and whisper a silent thank you to the sky watchers who built this place so precisely you can still feel their pulse. You adjust your pack, tip your head back to catch more sunlight on your face, and begin your descent. Each step echoes the terrace's measured alignment, light, reflection, shadow, an endless loop of observation and wonder. as you move toward the cobbled courtyard beyond, where platforms await another form of starlit communion. Remember that every aperture here is a portal, framing celestial moments you'll carry in your mind long after darkness falls. You step into the hushed confines of an open-air arena, the grass worn slick underfoot where generations of footfalls and heels pressed into the earth. Stone walls rise on either side, sloping inward like a narrowing throat, and you feel the hush of anticipation still clinging to the air. Treetops press against the sky above the far end, and shafts of evening light slant across the court's narrow expanse. Somewhere in the recesses of your memory, you catch the distant echo of drums, the same low-frequency pulse you have heard. Beneath the eclipse chambers, vaulted ribs, and through the labyrinthine marketplaces, hush. This is the Mesoamerican ball court, where the Maya ball game thrived from at least 1400 BC until the Spanish conquest. Played in courts shaped like an eye with sloping walls and end zones marked by ringstones several meters high. Historians still argue whether the game symbolized cosmic battles between day and night, or served as a proxy for warfare, sometimes even ending in human sacrifice if the stakes were high. You can't help but glance at those stone rings overhead, wondering how players could have propelled a solid/rubber ball through them without modern knee pads or a chiropractor on call. You brush a palm across the court's flat surface, milling. The granular grit press into your palm like offset printing plates. Faint red smears cling to cracks, perhaps ochre from sacrificial rituals on the sacrificial causeway, or just a prank by thrill-seeking tourists wearing red shirts. Fringe theorists insist the ballgame courts were built on ley lines that channeled They channeled spiritual energy, claiming that if you bounce a ball here at midnight, you'll rebound at a precise frequency mirrored by crop-circling waves in distant fields. If you hear a hum matching the canal's water lullaby, don't blame me, blame the lay hunters. You walk to one sloping wall and lean back, tracing the carved relief of a player wearing hip guards and a yoke-shaped belt. It's the same belt design. Appears in a mural you admired in the Hall of Painted Beasts, as if the artistry traveled from painted corridors into carved stone. The relief's edges are softened by centuries of rain and foot traffic, but you can still make out the protective helmets and small plaques that held decorative feathers. Archaeologists note that these protective pads were made of heavy cotton soaked in salt water, offering limited cushioning against a ball sometimes hurled at speeds exceeding 9 ms. Historians still argue whether the game's primary objective was to score points by ricocheting balls off those rings, or to keep the ball in play until ritual terms were met. A sudden breeze murmurs across the court, carrying the scent of damp earth and jungle, decay, a callback to the dripping vines in the Hall of Painted Beasts, and the steady drip-drip in the eclipse chamber. Leaves rustle overhead like a whispering crowd, and you can almost hear the roar of spectators once seated on terraced benches high above the playing field. You close your eyes and let your imagination conjure lacquered masks and painted faces, cheering on favored teams draped in jaguar pelts, the same jaguar motif you traced along the monoliths in that mossy grove. You crouch to examine a carved depression at the court's center, a circular disc flanked by carved glyphs. It reads like a calendar round, marking particular dates when the ball game served as a ritual to renew Maze's life cycle. Mainstream researchers link these dated events to solar and lunar calendars documented in the Dresden Codex. Fringe enthusiasts argue that repeating those ballgame ceremonies today could realign planetary orbits via sympathetic ritual magic. If you try it on the next full moon, let me know if Jupiter shows up a little out of place. You stand and drift toward the far end, where a pair of ringstones perch high above the slanted walls, impossible targets you can barely glimpse through the gathering dusk. Players used only hips, thighs, and forearms to strike the heavy rubber ball no hands or feet allowed. You curl your fists and gingerly press a knuckle into the top of the wall, imagining the fiery sting of striking that ball day after day. Historians still argue whether professional players were revered like modern athletes or ostracized as sacrificial catalysts destined to be offered to the gods when victory demanded a life. Above the ring stones, a pair of sculpted skulls flank each side, grinning like silent referees. You recall the Plaza of Bones, where mask-like skull sculptures leered at onlookers in Section 6. Here, they oversee the final judgment of the ball game: victory, defeat, life, or death. You touch one skull's cheekbone, feeling the grooves of carved teeth, and shiver as a moth flutters past, bumping your shoulder. Death and sport intertwined beneath an open sky. Shadows deepen as the sun sinks lower, and the court's walls seem to close in. You head toward a narrow passage at the court's southern wall, where worn steps lead down into a side chamber. Rumor has it players, be they victors or vanquished, treated here afterward for ritual purification. Mainstream accounts cite sweet baths called temazcals, where sweat and steam cleansed both body and spirit before communal feasting. Historians still argue whether these sweat lodges were hygienic retreats or undertones for deeper purification rites involving herbal infusions and ritual fasting. Stepping down, the air grows cooler and damper. The faint scrawl of graffiti from Spanish visitors peeks from beneath soot deposits, names and dates scratched during early colonial explorations. Fringe conspiracy circles claim the graffiti holds secret codes revealing hidden tunnels that lead back to the eclipse chamber. If you spot a concealed door, don't proceed without mosquito repellent and, a healthy skepticism in this side chamber. A shallow basin carved into the floor catches trickles of groundwater. You kneel beside it, dipping a finger into the cool liquid. The water tastes faintly mineral, with a trace of sweetness you recognize from the reflective pools at the sunken temple. It might have been used by players to wash off sweat and ritual dust before re-entering the court. Or perhaps it held libations of pulque or cacao-infused water for meditative sips. Fringe mixologists advertise wall-court cocktails using this water as a base, though mainstream bartenders caution that centuries-old stone might introduce more grit than flavor. Rising again, you emerge back onto the court, the last pail, light brushing the ring stones in ghostly silver. You pop a few steps to test the slope. Gravity forges a tug in your knees. You pause mid-stride, arms outstretched, recalling the balanced slalom of athletes once leaping between walls in graceful arcs. If you hop along the court's length, your footsteps echo like a drumbeat, and you almost feel part of the ceremonial rhythm. A solo performer in an enjoyable dance of life and death. You wander toward a corner niche where carved images depict two players locked in close combat, hip bone to hip bone, glaring at each other. The sculptor captured tension in every line, muscles straining, bodies arching, eyes fixed on an unseen sphere. You lean in, finger tracing the carved brows, and grin at the sculpted mouth twisted into a half snarl. Archers' bots might capture this on 3D scans now. Here it's tactile art you can nearly flex under your fingertips. A sudden chirpa. It's field cricket hidden in the wall jolts. You flatten your palm against the stone. Another callback to that steel drum of crickets under monolith roots. The chanting insects mingle with your own breath as you step back, taking in the entire court in one sweep. It's a stage both sacred and confrontational, where players embodied cosmic dualities, and crowds reveled in the tension of raw athleticism as darkness deepens. You switch on your flashlight and sweep the beam upward, illuminating faded glyphs at the base of the walls. You catch symbols of the hero twins Hanap and Xebalanque, whose mythic ballgame duel against underworld lords unfolded across the Popol Vuh. Their trials echo here, as the mythic ballgame served as both entertainment and spiritual allegory. Historians still argue whether the hero twins narrative was ritualized during actual games or passed down purely as mythic lore. If you recite the twins' challenge chant, you might summon echoes of that epic showdown, though likely only in your echoing helmet. You gather your pack and take one last lap around the court's perimeter, your footfalls stirring tiny dust motes that drift in the flashlight beam like fireflies. You can almost see the faint shimmer of bioluminescent canal larvae ghosting across the mural of night beasts in your mind. This court, too, feels alive, its rhythms beating through stone and sweat, echoing the whale-like hum of underground water and the measured choreography of light through stone. Leaving the Balcourt's hush behind, you head through the exit tunnel at the northern end, to cut out in the wall, just high enough to duck under. As you pass beneath, you brush a shoulder against carved glyphs, marking game outcomes and offerings an intimate farewell from those who played before you. Beyond awaits the overgrown aqueduct wonders, where water once flowed high above the ground in channels now choked by vines. Historians still argue whether those aqueducts primarily supplied daily water or fueled grand fountains for public spectacle. You step into the corridor's growing darkness, carrying the court's final echo in your heart, ready for the next chapter's murmured marvels. You slip out of the Balcourt's exit tunnel and find yourself on a narrow causeway bordered by tangled vines and the distant drip of water echoes of the sunken temples, pools, and the hidden channel beneath the sacrificial bridge. Pushing aside a curtain of philodendron leaves, you step into the realm of overgrown aqueducts. Ancient stone channels arch above you, straddling carved support pillars that rise like silent watchers. The channels once carried water from distant springs into the city's heart, supplying palaces and plazas with fresh flow. Now they stand half-choked by orchids, ferns, caves, and creeping roots that have claimed every crevice. Running your hand along the channel's rim, you feel moss spongy under your fingertips, damp like a towel left too long in the hamper. Every inch of stone is glazed with moisture, and droplets hang overhead like a league of tiny chandeliers waiting to shower you at any moment. A humid breeze stirs, carrying the scent of decaying wood and wild ginger recall back to the jasmine-laced tunnel and trance you first crept into in Section 1. Somewhere above, a heron cries out, its song slicing through the hum of cicadas and your own heartbeat. Archaeologists date these aqueducts to the late Classic period, around AD 700 to 900, when Maya engineers mastered gravity-fed water distribution with precision, rivaling Roman plumbing. Historians still argue whether these channels primarily served elite palaces, atop pyramids, or supplied communal fountains in public plazas. Either way, their sheer length spanning kilometers from hillside springs speaks to remarkable logistical planning and hydraulic know-how that defies casual strolls through jungle underbrush. You duck beneath a vine-swaddled arch and discover a cross-channel where water once diverted to ritual baths. Now, the basin's lip is disguised under layers of lichen, and the remnants of carved weir gates peek out like the teeth of hidden crocodiles. Fringe enthusiasts claim these gates weren't just valves for water, but energy switches that regulated Earth's ley lines, so if you tap a carved knob here at midnight, you might realign your chakras with cosmic currents. Spoiler, the only realignment you'll feel is the one in your back from crouching too long. A sudden drip 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 echoes from a nearby spout, still faintly channeling groundwater through spores of algae that glow pale green at dusk. You cup your hands and taste the trickle, clean, cool, with a faint, earthy temps. If you close your eyes, you can almost trick yourself into thinking it's spring water from a bottled label. Pure Heritage Aqueduct, now extinct. Modern chemists have tested similar Maya aqueduct water for purity levels that, in some cases, rival contemporary municipal supplies. Historians still argue whether water quality was intentionally controlled, or simply a happy accident of limestone filtration. Moving along the mossy ledge, you spot a vine-wrapped inscription carved into the channel wall. A series of dots and bars marking calendar counts aligned to rainy seasons. Maya dynasts may have commissioned channel openings to coincide with agricultural festivities, releasing fresh flows as ceremonial blessings. You trace the glyphs with a gloved fingertip, dislodging a cluster of microfrogs that scatter with tiny, splashy snatures' startled exit. If you swallowed an energy bar before this, you've now got a bona fide frog massage. Who needs a spa day? The aqueduct curves overhead and deposits water into a raised cistern you first glimpsed peeking through vines earlier in section 11. Here, the cistern is filled with silt and fallen leaves, its angular edges softened by centuries of organic siege. You scramble up a collapsed side ladder to peer inside. The stench hits you wet mildew, rotting flora, and maybe a hint of unexpected algae bloom. Yet, amidst the debris, you spot fragments of painted pigment, red ochre smears from the sacrificial causeway, and faint blue streaks matching the avenue of market awnings. This is the city's water hub, a confluence of color and flow, where all your previous explorations from the Plaza of Bones to the Serpent shrined converged in silent tribute to water. Leaning back, you catch a low hum in the stone's vibrations from water trickling through unseen conduits. It's the same elemental chorus you heard when floating through eclipse sanctums and watching canal larvae glow. In this labyrinth of stone troughs, water feels alive, coursing not just through channels, but through the city's memory. A deep breath, savoring the moist air, and crack a joke to yourself. Maya plumbing keeping it flowing since forever. The absurdity of ancient piping outlasting your last shower at a dodgy hostel strikes you as deeply satisfying. You clamber down and follow a narrow stone walkway alongside the main channel. Tape-like loads of vines hang overhead, occasionally brushing your shoulders and leaving damp streaks on your shirt. A pair of orchids spills over the channel's lip, their white petals dotted with crimson pollen, nature's own polka dot party. You lean in to sniff, sweet, floral, with an undertone of mildew. Perfect for high-fashion fragrance lines or mid-hike pick-me-ups, your choice. Up ahead, spot a collapsed arch where the channel once crossed a smaller stream. The sandstone blocks lie strewn like fallen dominoes, and you scramble across. Their slick surfaces, mindful of potential snake dens beneath. If you trip here, the only injuries will be bruised ego and possibly sprained ankles. Fringe folklore warns these collapsed aqueducts are gateways to underworld rivers used by shamans to travel between realms. Historians still argue whether any Maya practiced water-based shamanism, or if these are modern flight of fancy pitched by tour guides with flair past the ruin. The channel picks up again, spiraling around a cluster of kapok tree roots that have enveloped the stone like giant riffs on a vine guitar. The roots wrap into channels, merging organic and engineered forms until you can't tell where stone ends and plant begins. If you squint, you swear the roots pulse with water flow, though that might just be wishful thinking after hours of ASMR drip immersion. Finally, you emerge onto a wide terrace where the aqueduct spills water into a rectangular pool once lined with painted stucco. Now, the pool is choked with reeds, and its surface is a mirror of green filigree. You step onto a submerged ledge and feel the cool current swirl around your ankles. The pool's edge bears a carved relief of a fish's mouth open and eternal, gulp suggesting this was once a decorative fountain, perhaps commissioned by an elite lord eager to flaunt piped water like a modern mansion's jacuzzi. Historians still argue whether these pools were for show or essential community. Water stops. You sit on the terrace's stone bench, legs dangling in the cool water, and let the gentle sway of ripples cradle you. The channel's final trickle. Melody harmonizes with the croak of bullfrogs and the distant whoosh of wind through canopy. You smile at how often your journey converges on water sound, first in canal tunnels, then sunken temple basins, eclipse sanctums, and now here. It's as if every ruin you explore is threaded together by the same liquid lifeblood rising. You wipe your feet on a towel of palm fronds. Mild scratches stinging your calves' jungle exfoliation, courtesy of stray orchids and vine thorns. Final glance at the overgrown channels reminds you that human ingenuity can be both enduring and ephemeral. Stone outlasts cotton banners, but even stone yields two relentless green fingers over centuries. You pat the channel's side, whispering a thank you for still channeling life. Then turn your gaze eastward. Ahead lies the twilight-lit approach to the sacrificial causeway, its ochre splashes still vivid in your mind's eye. Beyond that, the final summit awaits. The distant masonry of the twilight's final farewell, where golden light will fade over your dreams. You adjust your pack, take a last sip of channel water, and step away from these overgrown aqueduct wonders, carrying their murmur in your memory as you walk toward the city's ultimate goodbye. You emerge onto a broad terrace where fading sunlight drapes the distant pyramids in molten amber. The air is cooling now, scented with damp earth and crushed leaves. And you can almost hear the sigh of centuries weaving through the crumbling masonry. You step to the terrace's edge and gaze out over the city's final embrace. Temples tiered in the distance. Causeways stretched like veins through jungle green, and the winding canal glinting faintly where it survives. Every stone seems too warm and softened in the dying light, so the whole place exhales one last breath before night's curtain falls. Mainstream. Archaeologists place the city's apex during the Terminal Classic period, roughly AD 800 to 1000, when political upheaval, drought, and shifting trade routes led to gradual abandonment. Historians still argue whether environmental stress or internecine warfare drove the rulers to desert their stone sanctuaries, leaving them for vines and termites to reclaim. Either way, you feel a solemn hush that mirrors that final exodus. Echo of footfalls never retraced. Voices never carried beyond these sandstone walls. A gentle breeze skims the terrace, carrying a flurry of orchid petals that spiral around your ankles before drifting toward the valley below. Fringe enthusiasts claim those drifting blooms are seeds of ancestral spirits, planting new dreams in the undergrowth each night. If you catch one in your hand, legend says it grants a vision of the city as it once throbbed with bustle, smoke, and song. You hold a single petal, its texture thinner than tissue paper and flecked with golden pollen, and wonder if your imagination is already turning it to prophecy. You step back and notice the carved reliefs edging the terrace, the sun, deity arcing in stone across a low wall, the maize god kneeling in offerings, serpent coils framing each corner. The glyphs are weathered but legible, calendrical counts, dynastic references, and the occasional abstract symbol whose meaning scholars still debate beneath academic lamplight. Historians still argue whether some of these glyphic panels record a final royal decree or commemorate a last great ceremony marking the city's twilight. You press your fingers against the cool limestone, tracing a row of dots and bars, one more Teotihuacan cycle fulfilled. Another dispatched into the folds of time. Below. The long plaza you crossed glows pink in the sunset. You recall the skull-stitted benches, the mask fragments, and the hushed rhythm of the ball court. You remember the canal's reflective pools, the eclipse chamber's shaft of light, and the observatory's sight tubes pointing to dawn. Now, from this vantage, each site is a note in an unfinished composition, the whole city a symphony that, ends with the last dying ray. A low bird call rises nightjar, perhaps sliding through the air like a slow, mournful horn. You answer with a soft hum, half in greeting, half unconsciously echoing that drone you once heard beneath the monoliths. The sound wraps around you, okay? And you feel connected to every living creature that has sounded its voice here since time began. The terrace tilts gently toward a collapsed section where vines tumble in waterfalls of green. Through that break, you glimpse the jungled valley beyond, shrouded in early shadows. The colors bleed from gold to violet to near black in seconds. You watch as fireflies ignite among the trees, pinpricks of ephemeral light dancing against the darkening backdrop. It's as though the city itself is winking goodnight, blinking against encroaching darkness. You kneel on the flagstones, brushing dust from a carved handprint smoothed by generations. Do you think of the sacrifice causeways? Ochre hues, the serpent shrines, silver scales, and the aqueduct's murmuring flow. All merge here in one final tableau. Stone, water, sky. And you transient traveler threading your story into the city's endless narrative. From your pack, you produce a small calabash of water drawn from that overgrown pool. You lift it in. A silent toast to the builders who shaped this place with sweat and reverence. To the priests who charted eclipses and seasons. To the dancers who leaped beneath torches. And to the ghosts who venture here at twilight. You sip the water cool, faintly mineral, carrying the flavor of moss and time, and let the last light warm your face. A hush descends, tinged with expectancy. You stand and stretch, fingertips brushing the low wall's serpent motif, as if bidding farewell to a patient friend. The marble-toned scales gleam one final time, then recede into shadow. You step back, heart steady and mind serene, watching as darkness pools around ancient stones. By the time you turn to leave, twilight has deepened into indigo. The city no longer stands distinct against the jungle. Shape and void blend into one. You take a final breath, whispering thanks into the night, and walk down the flagged steps toward the path that will return you to waking world, now that you stand at the threshold of memory and night. The golden light dissolves into soft violet hues, and every shadow across ancient stones stretches into gentle silhouettes, reminding you that time flows like the pulse of a heartbeat. Each whispered memory of footsteps and water and flame settles around your heart like a cloak, warming you with the kindness of ages. Let your breathing ease, as the distant murmur of dripping water and the tender whisper of warm breeze lull you into a deeper tranquility, washing away any lingering tension or worry, as if the very air carries a balm of serenity, cradling your thoughts like drifting petals on a still pond until your mind floats free. Feel the weight of millennia lift from your shoulders and spine, leaving only the quiet resonance of stones softened by twilight, each contour shaped by seasons of sun and rain, its edges growing tender in the fading glow, as if these ancient walls sigh in relief and beckon you to rest within their timeless embrace, wrapped in the comfort of forgotten stories. Trust that you are safe, carried by the hush of history into the gentle cradle of sleep, as mossy walls and vine-laced columns retreat like distant friends bidding a kind farewell, warming the space around you with echoes of whispered chants and candlelit ceremonies that once filled these stones with reverent breath and settle into the calm rest, now in the soft embrace of this night-infused silence, where dreams drift like lanterns over ancient plazas and temple tops, carried on gentle breezes that stir only the leaves and coalesce into stories of starlight and stone. And know that these lost cities will await your return in stillness. There, whispers ever soft and steady as a lullaby meant for you. End of script. Sweet dreams.